and at the same time this interest in privacy, which I think increasingly lots of news stories seem to cover. Kids who find themselves, recent college graduates who've gone all the way through college on Facebook and now find themselves struggling in an economy like this one to get job interviews when people can find all kinds of bad drinking pictures about them online, and are kind of trying to manage their digital lives differently.
Yeah, well, then there was an inherent irony in the whole thing, in that the whole idea was supposed to be that I'm disappearing, that I'm showing what it's like to disappear, and yet every day I had this surreal experience where I could get online and there were thousands of people talking about me and talking about who were my friends, and look at this new picture of him, and I found a video of him. So it was also the ultimate exposure in a way, at the same time that the whole point was supposed to be, disappearing. It was the opposite effect was taking place.
I mean, did you do anything differently? Did you modify your behavior or sort of digital lifestyle or any other aspect of it after this was over?
No, to be honest, I didn't really. I tightened up my Facebook privacy settings and the kinds of things that people do. But for me, it's too late. I mean, all the stuff's out there. It's still all out there. You can find my signature on the apartment that I bought. Everything is posted online. I just had to rely in the end on the fact that once the context was over, people could care less about me or my information. So it didn't really, besides being weird, it didn't really seem to change my life much once it's over. But no, I'm a little more careful, but I think you have to make almost a holistic decision whether you want to join that world or not. I mean, as you're saying, with not being on Facebook or not being on Twitter, you can do partial measures, but then you're relying on the companies to sort of, their goodwill, that they're going to help you, and they have no interest in helping you maintain your privacy. So the easiest way to maintain your privacy is not to join. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the strange thing for me is to find periodically that I'm actually on Facebook, even without having a Facebook account. That there are pictures of me sometimes that other people post from a party or something and then tag afterwards and tag them to me so that somehow, I'm still there, which is kind of bizarre. It's a weird way in which kind of socially now we've almost been trained to surveil each other in this under the guise of kind of fun or networking, or this benign sharing of information, where we find ourselves kind of mimicking what the government's doing in a certain way, though we don't even know what the government's doing. But I just think it's fascinating that in the last decade we've essentially seen this collapse between the kind of state security apparatus on one hand and then the sort of entertainment digital culture apparatus on the other, that now sort of they work sometimes in tandem, as your project pointed out, and then sometimes independently. But I mean, you were saying before that you went and gave a presentation at the CIA. I mean, did you ever ask them what they were interested in?
I did. I asked them many times. So I got invited to come speak to the CIA at CIA headquarters at a conference that they have, and at first I thought it was a joke. Actually, I thought someone was, partly because the CIA acts in really bizarre ways. Like, they would only send me things in unmarked envelopes typed on an actual typewriter. And so it looked like someone was playing a joke on me, but it turned out they did want me to come speak, and I kept asking, like, what did you... And a lot of them, what they said was that they had a challenge which is related to the challenge that I had in this, which is that when they have agents go overseas and they need an identity, that in the old days you could kind of give them a fake business, you could give them a name and business cards, as I had, and they could kind of go with it. But now, because of database technology, you can run a background check on someone for $25, and that background check will get things like every address they've ever lived at, their credit history, all of that stuff exists. So what they call the backstop for the identity has to be much deeper than it used to be. Now, whether they didn't learn anything from me about how to do that. I think it was more because I had thought about the same issues. They had some database experts who spoke at the same time who actually really did have advice on those topics, but I had no advice to share on how they could improve their their identities.
But so it's weirdly easier, it sounds like, and we've talked about this before, to steal someone else's identity than to try and create a fictional one.
Yeah, I mean, it all partly depends on what side of the law you want to be on. So, right. If in my case, if I wanted to buy a fake passport, if I wanted to go online and get into a social security number market and buy a social security number, those things are possible online. But in terms of establishing a new identity, especially if someone's looking for you, it's so much harder than it used to be, because as much as there's some anonymity online, in the real world, it's much harder to have anonymity than it ever was. And you can get online and go into a forum and be anonymous, or go into Second Life or whatever you want. But in your real life, you need ID for everything. You need a social security number for everything. And to your point about the way that sort of like surveillance has merged with Hollywood and social networking and all these things. I had investigators, U.S. Marshals and private investigators who specialize in looking for people, who said, 20, 30 years ago, it would take us months to gather what we can gather in 5 minutes or less on Facebook. If we want to find someone, right, we would have to build up a profile about them. And right, what you've done is you've actually built up a profile about yourself. And right, and it goes even farther than that, the FBI and U.S. Marshals and the Secret Service, they have fake profiles on Facebook, and they use them to catch people. They use them to lure people into conversations and to give away their location.
Yeah, I mean, the best version of that in reverse, I thought, was the crashing of the White House state dinner by that couple who wanted to have a reality show and somehow infiltrated state security in an effort to, and took pictures and then posted them online of themselves inside the barriers supposedly maintained by the government to protect the president.
Right, yeah. I guess showing that even though, as much as they have more access to tools, it doesn't mean they're not bumbling.
Right, right. Maybe we should open it up for questions. Do people have questions? I think there are microphones around, so that everyone can hear it.
Like this exhibit is called Minneapolis in Winter.
I know, it's really cold.
It's so cold up here.
Hey, Evan, I read your article when it came out in Wired, and I was wondering, towards the end, when you were getting really paranoid, like around the time of the helicopter thing, did you almost find yourself kind of subconsciously wanting to be caught just to be over with it?
Well, I didn't. The helicopter thing actually happened at the end of the first week. So that kind of paranoia built up when I realized how many people were paying attention to it, because remember, when we started it, we didn't have any idea if 5 people or 100 or 1,000 were actually going to care. And is $5,000 a lot for this kind of thing or not? So when I realized how many people were paying attention, I got pretty paranoid, and that's when I ran from the helicopter. But at that point, I really, really did not want to get caught, because first of all, it would be embarrassing to get caught after anything less than 2 weeks. And also, I had kind of put a lot of people through a lot of minor trauma to do this. My family was worried about what was going to happen. I left my girlfriend behind for a month, and we were moving, and these were things that I wanted to try to push it as far as I could and not have wasted everyone's sort of emotional energy to do it. But by the end, I think I actually kind of fell off my paranoia, partly because I had been worn down. I remember I was riding a train from, I think, New Orleans to Memphis, and there was a guy sitting there, and he kept looking over at me. And I just thought, this guy knows who I am. He recognizes me. And then he got off at the next stop. And then I started thinking, what am I doing? Like, not everyone knows about this stupid contest. It's my entire world, but it's not everyone else's world. So I think within that was this idea of like, I did just kind of want it to be over at a certain point. But then
that's also how you got caught.
That's partly how I got caught. But even when I got caught, I was angry, though, because as I got closer to the end, there was only 4 days left. So
and the $5,000 looked closer.
Yeah, exactly. And I may or may not have mentioned, but $3,000 of the $5,000 I put up for it. So that was my incentive to not get caught, was I was going to lose $3,000. So you can imagine when I actually finally did get caught, and these guys are like jumping up and down and dancing around because they've just won $5,000, and I'm sitting there having lost $3,000, and then they took me out and bought me a pizza.
Gluten-free.
Yeah.
Another question up there.
Yeah, my question is, did you consider not inventing another identity for online? I mean, it would seem to me that if you wanted truly not to be found, you'd stay away from the internet entirely. But that wasn't your challenge, I gather.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you want to avoid being caught by your IP address, for example, you do not go online. I mean, that is the best thing for you to do. But at the same time, if you think about, it's one thing to think about escaping for a month, but if you think about trying to start over in your life, you're saying you're not going to go online, for the indefinite future. And my thought was, well, if I actually did want to abandon my life in the manner of someone who, let's say, fakes their own death, I wouldn't want to start over as a hermit. I like being online. I like using email. I like these things. So I wanted to see what the challenge would be if I did continue to use them, if I lived a life that was sort of parallel to my own, but with a different name.
This is a question for Evan. What did you expect to be difficult but found to be easy?
I think that, think about that. I thought would be difficult and easy. I mean, the getting around was easier than I expected, partly because, I had a problem at first because I wanted to take Amtrak a lot, but Amtrak has an ID requirement. I didn't realize it had an ID requirement, but then that was really scary at first. But then I realized how, paper thin that requirement actually is, where no one's ever really paying attention. It's like this habitual security measure that if you think about it, it doesn't really even accomplish anything. Like anyone can have an ID, and the fact that I show you an ID doesn't tell you anything about what I'm going to do or anything. So once I realized that they weren't really paying attention and that I could kind of talk my way around it wherever I went, then taking Amtrak, even though they asked for ID, was easy. And also, it was surprisingly easy. I thought it was going to be a problem to convince people that I was who I said I was. And that's why I had all this, elaborate setup of web pages and Facebook accounts and all that sort of thing. But, people are pretty trusting, and they're not automatically suspicious of you. So even though oftentimes I was doing sort of weird things, the band that I hitched a ride with, they wondered, and they told me later they did wonder, what is this guy doing? Like, why is he going across the country? He seems to have no purpose. He's like too old for this, and also his goatee has died. Like, what is he trying to like relive his youth or something? But it didn't seem like I was doing any harm. So, and everyone I encountered, they had a sort of natural trust that I guess if I thought about it, it makes sense. You don't automatically assume someone's giving you a fake name. But then later, I felt really guilty about it. So I actually went back and I had to apologize to everyone that I had interacted with over the course of a month that I could find.